they just retire and then finally show a little bit backbone at the last possible second. Like we've seen this story so many times now. And then they do a woe is me. People are so mean to those of us that want to try bipartisanship. And it's dangerous. Like we're getting mean mail. The whole thing is so pathetic. It's just like unbelievably pathetic. Like you are a U.S. Senator. Try. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Delighted to be here in person with Bill Kristol on Monday. I was up in D.C. for some meetings. I snuck in a car seat headrest concert on Saturday. You're a big car seat headrest man, right, Bill?
I wouldn't even ask. I'm scared to even, I'm terrified to even ask, what is car seat headrest one thing or two things? Or three things?
It's a one. It's a band. It's a Virginia, a local guy, Will Toledo. Yeah, it's really good. Bill,
folk music?
Not exactly, I wouldn't say. Kind of like a gloomy rock. Kind of like a
Gloomy's
rock.
good. Gloomy's good.
It fit my mood. I wonder before we get into the news, the real news. You were doing a big fan of the Bezos wedding coverage this weekend?
Following it minute to minute, really. Right. I was just fascinated
Everybody's outfits.
I had a lot of thoughts about the outfits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was in Venice. That's all I know about it.
Yeah, I got to tell you, nothing has happened to make me more pro Zoran in the last month than the Bezos wedding. I know I saw you announced you're anti Zoran, and I got to tell you, I'm. The more I see of Jeff Bezos, the more Zoran curious I start to get, which I know is a wrong impulse, but I have to be honest about my feelings.
I mean, not to overthink this, but there's a reason a ton of people became socialists, or social democrats at least, democratic socialists a century ago, because they saw the plutocrats, right? I mean, it is like that is a real thing. And I do feel like we're reliving this a little bit. I'm not quite as, I'm still anti-Zoran and anti-Zoran. I'm trying to keep both, but the Bezos, what was it? Just grotesque and it cost $50 million or something?
I mean, he invited Trump because he's sucking up, if Trump didn't go, but he's like sucking up to him because he wants the rocket money. Oh. And it's like, does the second richest man in the world, third, need government handouts? He's got to suck up to the authoritarian to get more handouts from the government. Yeah, and then the wedding itself, it's like, I honor second marriages. You know, that's good, but we can be a little bit more demure about the whole thing.
I don't think so.
A little more demure.
I don't think so. Not if you're a Bezos, but yeah, the richest people are the biggest suck-ups. I have not seen a good, deep sociological, explanation of that, though. It is contrary to what one would think.
Cuban and I talked about it a little bit.
Is that right?
Yeah, and Cuban's answer was deeply unsatisfying, if I have to say. But it was, it was kind of more just like they are psychologically like they're competitive, and they like want to do well and want to win, and like in this environment, it's like, well, if this is what we got to do, for my business, they're survivors. If you've made that kind of money, it's not usually by accident, right? Like, there's some bodies buried along the way. I don't know. That was the Cuban answer. It's not deeply the whole thing is deeply unsatisfying. But we do have one good billionaire, soon to be trillionaire. I don't know if you're ready to listen to this, but I want to read to you, I think, the most penetrating critique of Trump's Big Fugly Bill from anyone. This was over the weekend. The latest Senate draft bill will destroy millions of jobs in America and cause immense strategic harm to our country. Utterly insane and destructive. It gives handouts to industries of the past while severely damaging industries of the future. That's Elon Musk, the former shadow president. And that's pretty crazy. Everybody was like, oh, they made up and Elon's not going to, Elon's going to back down because he wants the rocket ship money or whatever. I mean, that is about as tough a critique as I've seen from any Democrat.
I guess he knows a lot about electric vehicles and understands that, he likes the subsidies. But there's something crazy about subsidizing coal and non-subsidizing clean energy, right? Which is literally the way they're going. Which incidentally, there's not even, as I can see, there's not even like an economic, there are fancy economic arguments for why we shouldn't do away with coal and why it's not as dirty as people think and blah, 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 and we shouldn't subsidize Teslas too much. That's all reasonable. This is just the culture war, right? I mean, it's like we're going to just really go out of our way to dig more coal. Is that really a good idea?
They're also like, I had Nick Kristol on Friday. We were talking about kind of the stupidity parts of Doge to give you the other side of Elon, like these cuts that didn't actually save anything, actually cost money. That's happening on the green subsidies too, right? It's like we I forget off the top of my head. I think it was we've already purchased the
Right.
electric postal service cars.
Right.
That now we're canceling the part where they can charge or something. I forget what it was. Like some part of the electrification of the postal service cars is already done, but this bill is like we're canceling all of the money for anything associated with anything that happened under Joe Biden's effort. So they're just going to be stranded, or we're going to have to sell them to, I guess, people that want
Postal,
use
little
postal
postal.
service.
There's a big market for the postal vans. Don't they open on the wrong side? Incidentally, doesn't the
Is that right?
doesn't the postal worker get out the other side? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
drives
know.
on the wrong side. Maybe I made that up. Seems that way in our area.
Update. So anyway, okay. Well, that's the Elon complaint. The other big news about the BBB and what I want to spend most of the time on here today is Thom Tillis. So actually, let me back up for folks who are not watching the back and forth of what is actually happening with the bill. So over the weekend, the first vote is always this vote for cloture, which is basically a vote to bring the bill to the floor, right? And so a lot of times things get blocked during this step. Like it's not an unimportant, step in the hurdle in the process for people who aren't Senate procedure nerds. And the Republicans in the Senate have basically a 3-vote margin, right? Because JD Vance can cut the tie. So you can lose 3 Republicans and still pass anything with the tie. So Rand Paul's a no on this. Ron Johnson's been a no because of the spending. One cheer for Ron Johnson or no?
Well, he flipped, right?
For Ron Johnson.
But he flipped at the end.
Flip?
Yeah. That's why it's 51-49.
He flipped in the last
Yeah,
vote.
the president satisfied his concerns about
Yeah,
spending.
got it. Okay, so
Magically.
it's him, Paul, and then Tillis.
Right.
Tillis, we're going to get to in a second, who's retiring. The interesting part of that to me was like, if you just have Tillis and Paul, Collins and Murkowski could have killed it. But they both ended up being for cloture. Now Collins is saying that she is leaning against in the final vote, but she wants to. She gives deference to John Thune on what he gets to bring to the floor, as if like this is the stuff like in 1700s. But so they had a chance to kill it. Tillis has been the most vocal. While this is all going on, while he announces that he's going to oppose advancing it to the floor, he also announces that he's going to retire from the Senate. He joins a long line of brave Republicans who finally who finally oppose Trump right as they're about to walk out the door. Hello, Bob Corker, et cetera, et cetera. We could go down the whole list. So I want to play. This was Tillis on the floor explaining why he's going to vote against this.
They can't find a hole in my estimate. So what they told me is that, yeah, it's rough, but North Carolina's used the system. They're going to have to make it work. All right. So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there anymore, guys? In the White House, senators advising the president are not telling him that the effect of this bill is to break a promise.
I love the infantilization of Trump at the end.
Yeah.
His advisors are tricking him. It's his second term. He's been around for 9 years. He's like, and it's like, oh, he's being fooled by Russ' vote. And it's like, maybe the president just doesn't actually give a fuck about the so-called promises, the promises that he made Thom Tillis. So anyway, there's like a lot to unpack here. But before I know we both know a lot about the political cowardice of him retiring. But let's just talk about the actual policy side of it. So it's interesting that it's the Medicaid thing that's the deal breaker for him. Hawley, who also was talking a big game about not wanting Medicaid cuts, he gave maybe the most interesting and cynical defense for his vote, which kind of alluded to what Tillis said in that clip there, where he said in 2 or 3 years Trump's going to break his promise. Hawley basically is like, I'm going to vote for this, and then we're going to not actually do the cuts. Right. In 2 or 3 years, right? And so that's basically the Hawley argument for jamming this thing through. What do you think about the whole kind of back and forth on the Medicaid side? Then we'll get into the Tillis retirement.
I mean, Medicaid cuts are real. Jonathan Cohen, our colleague's written a ton about this. It's going to cost 10 million plus people health insurance. It has spillover effects for reasons that are too complicated to explain, and I probably couldn't explain, onto Medicare and Obamacare itself. And so it'll hurt some people who are getting insurance there too. And so it's nice that Thom Tillis is somewhat subtly, I could say, having voted for a million, Trump budgets in the past and for the repeal of Obamacare in 2017 and everything else.
Did people lose? Would people have lost health care in North Carolina during the Obamacare repeal?
I think they would have. The North Carolina situation is a little interesting, and that's not worth, again, because they did expand. They were a purplish state, Republicanish state that chose to expand Medicaid because of Roy Cooper, the Democratic governor, and he was able to get a Republican legislature to go along. Having expanded Medicaid, this would now cut back and affect the federal support for that expansion, which is why these 600,000 people are going to lose it. So I guess he's in a slightly different position now. He's decided that this expansion that every Republican, incidentally, at the national level was against was a good thing. Maybe he could make that rethink his general allegiance to Trumpian and Republican orthodoxy. But there's no evidence of that. Can I just go on about Tillis for a minute?
Let's
I
do
wrote
it.
some diatribe about this morning. And so he, on his way out, he says, incidentally, he's really going to work hard to have a Republican successor. He's going to, in fact, he wants to work with President Trump to have a Republican successor.
I've got the quote I want to read for you, and
Please.
then you can cook on it. So, because he was asked who he wants to replace him, and he says this: not Mark Robinson, because he would probably lose by 20 points. Other than
He's
that,
the lunatic guy, friend of yours, who ran last time.
He's a friend of mine. What? Because he ate pizza in the back of a porn shop. You think that's my crowd?
You did a lot of coverage of him. You will agree to that.
I do like porn shop coverage, porn shop related coverage. Anytime you don't give me a story where a man is sneaking a pizza into the peep show, I am going to cover it on the podcast. That's true. So anyway, not Mark Robinson. Other than that, here's the quote: "I'm here to get a Republican to come behind me. That's the last thing I would want to leave as my legacy."
Yeah. So he wants a Republican who will vote for Trump's forthcoming budgets in 2027 and 2028, which will continue, of course, to cut all kinds of domestic programs and carry out the Trumpian agenda. Thom Tillis has been, I know slightly, I think he's a decent person. He kind of would like to do, his Republican Party would be one we could live with, but he's gone along with everything. Everything. He was a key vote member of the Hegseth nomination. Wasn't he the guy who was teetering in the balance? He voted for Hegseth, for Tulsi Gabbard, for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for Pam Bondi, for Kash Patel. And incidentally, he doesn't seem to express much regret about what's happening in some of these areas, the politicization of the Justice Department, the mass deportation. Some of us think that's kind of as important as, not to minimize Medicaid, but no, not a word about that. Not a word about the $150 billion, is it in the bill, to triple or quintuple or something, the size of ICE and the whole detention and deportation program. It's nice that he's concerned about his Medicaid constituents, but
yeah, I'm even lower on him than that.
Okay, good.
I would say. Here's another quote from him in his retirement announcement: "It's become evident that leaders who embrace bipartisanship and independent thinking are becoming an endangered species." And I guess he's talking about himself there, but what did he do? What was his bipartisanship and independent thinking? This whole thing. So he retires right on the heels of Don Bacon retiring. And Don Bacon is the Republican House member in Omaha who, will tweet things about Ukraine that we agree with. He'll occasionally tweet criticisms of Trump, but he never was a holdout on any important bill. He never did anything to block any major Trump agenda item. And the two of them are like, well, the leaders who embrace bipartisanship and independent thinking are becoming an endangered species. Well, it's because you're endangering yourself. They're doing it to themselves. It's not like there is some invasive force out there that is killing, all of the, fauna in an area. They've decided to self-deport from Congress because they don't want to deal with the hassle. Thom Tillis, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Mitch McConnell, they could have all got together and actually tried to embrace bipartisanship and independent thinking. They could have gone across the aisle to Chuck Schumer and been what do we agree on? The four of us in the Democratic Senate conference. This is how legislative bodies work all over the world. Lisa Murkowski referenced this when she was asked about this in a podcast recently. She was coalition governments are not uncommon. There's a coalition government in Texas in the state legislature, in Alaska in the state legislature. There's in a lot of European countries. If they really want it, if they really cared about it wouldn't be exactly what we would want, right? It wouldn't be a Bulwark agenda that Mitch McConnell and Thom Tillis would be putting forth, but they could have given weapons to Ukraine, protected Medicaid, whatever other pet issues, about the whales Murkowski has in Alaska and, the lobsters that Susan Collins cares about. But they don't even try. They just retire and then finally show a little bit backbone at the last possible second. Like we've seen this story so many times now. And then they do a woe is me thing. Oh, people are so mean to those of us that want to try bipartisanship. And it's dangerous. Like we're getting mean mail. I'm just like, the whole thing is so pathetic. It's just like unbelievably pathetic. Like you are a U.S. Senator. Try. And in this last second, it's just going to be this limp opposition where he gets to pretend to be on the moral high ground on the Senate floor and not stop anything. They're going to end up jamming this through today. We're taping this Monday morning. The final vote on this is probably going to be late tonight or early tomorrow. They're going to have the votes on it, almost certainly.
I like the "it's become evident" formulation that, there's no room really left for statesmanship and for free thinking. Really? That just became evident like last week? Maybe it became evident, I don't know, January 20th, 2025. Maybe it became evident in Trump's Republican Party a lot earlier. Maybe North Carolina is kind of a swing state. Maybe he shouldn't have supported gasp. I won't even mention this. If he's watching, he'll die and full keel over in shock. Maybe he shouldn't have supported Donald Trump for re-election to the presidency. Maybe he should have told people who will not vote for Harris, just vote right in whoever the favorite son of North, Coach K or something, or whoever the favorite son of North, Dean Smith, the favorite son of North Carolina is.
Did he campaign for Nikki Haley? Again, like that's not my choice exactly. Yeah. It's not doing exactly what I wanted, but I don't remember Thom Tillis being out there banging the drum for how the Republicans should nominate a statesman-like presidential nominee.
So now he's shocked, and
he's going to support Lara Trump. That's what's going to end up happening.
Yeah.
He's going to end up complaining about bipartisanship and lack of statesmanship, and then he's going to end up endorsing.
That's really a good
formulation. He's going to probably end up supporting Lara Trump for Senate.
The one thing I would say Tillis and Bacon did to their credit is they were both actually pretty important in getting the Ukraine aid through a year ago. Now, that was sort of against Trump's wishes, so they get a little credit, but they had half the Republicans on the Hill with them, including the Speaker ultimately, and Thune at the time, and was it McConnell or rest of the leader, whoever, anyway, they were both for it. So it wasn't, quite the same as standing alone against Trump. But Ukraine, speaking of Ukraine, they could have insisted, as you say, four of them could have gotten together and said, we're not voting for a reconciliation bill that doesn't have aid for Ukraine. You got $150 billion for ICE? How about $50 billion for people who are actually fighting for freedom, not fighting against freedom, the Ukrainian armed forces? Oh, sorry. I mean, and so they did nothing. They did nothing. And now he's a lame duck. He can retire.
He doesn't even need for him. He's got Rand, actually, which is not going to vote for anything, so that's a bonus one. He just got to recruit two other people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And the whole thing is just so dispiriting and pathetic. And I guess a word about one other thing. There's also this part that bipartisanship and independent thinking are becoming an endangered species. No, bipartisanship and independent thinking are extinct in the Republican Party because you're in a cult. Right. And literally you might be replaced by the president's daughter-in-law. Like she is the top candidate to replace you in the Senate. Like you're in a cult. It's not true really in the Democratic Party. Like sure, Manchin and Sinema took some heat, so I think that's probably what he's referencing. But I had Alyssa Slotkin on last week. She's happy to work with Republicans on stuff. I had Tammy Baldwin on a couple months ago. She's happy to work with Republicans on stuff. So a lot of times on here, we're complaining about how the Democrats are too willing to work with the Republicans on stuff. Whitmer and others. So that's also just not. It's not true. Broadly, it's excuse making.
Yeah, and Hakeem Jeffries is getting beat up from the left for expressing discomfort with your friend Zoran Mondani. So he's got, which is fine. He's expressing discomfort. He'll probably end up supporting him, but maybe he'll support Cuomo at the end if he ends up rerunning and so forth. Who knows? But you're right. So in Fairfax County, right where I live, but the congressional district next to where I live, there was a primary Saturday, a firehouse primary that the party ran for the special election to replace Jerry Connolly, who died a month ago. And Jerry Connolly's former chief of staff, who's now, I think, on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, 62-year-old guy, moderate Democrat, won with 60% of the vote. So within 1 week, Mamdani wins in New York, young, firebrand, lefty, and centrist establishment Democrat wins and is going to go to the Congress from Virginia. Yeah, that's okay. It's just sort of, and neither is complaining about the other, that I know of. They may not love each other, but they're going to be in the same party. And I know, there is a fair amount of free thinking and diversity of thinking. It's too much for some of our friends on some issues. You know, we could do without a couple of things that Mamdani said and so forth. But I mean, in the Democratic Party, but yes, not well. But speaking of not, the irony that he might end up supporting Lara Trump and not coming to grips with the fact about the Republican Party. You know who's not mentioned in his 6-7 paragraph, I don't recall, resignation letter? Donald Trump. As you say, these things are just happening. Yeah. It's really unfortunate what's happening in American politics. You know, I mean, who could have thought it coming? Who could have thought a guy who demagogued his way to the presidency, to the nomination of the presidency in 2016, tried to launch a coup in 2021, and comes back afterwards on January 20th, pardons everyone from January 6th, makes explicit that he's running a basically pro-January 6th administration. I won't even go into all the details. Stuffs the Justice Department, blah, 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 blah. Who could have thought that, you know, that would be a problem for American politics?
Yeah, I got into an argument with your friend, Karl Rove, on a panel. I think it was back in January. And it was a friendly argument. But, like, it actually centered on Tillis. He was basically making the case that, like, it's good to have somebody like Tillis in there. Like, we'd rather have somebody like Tillis in there because, you know, when push comes to shove, he's not crazy and he's not going to push crazy stuff. And I was on the side of not really, actually. It's maybe net zero. Like maybe doesn't matter at all if it's Tillis versus a crazy person because Tillis votes like a crazy person essentially. Like, or maybe it's actually net harmful because Tillis like provides a patina of coverage to vote for MAGA for people like Karl Rove and for people who read Karl Rove and you know the Wall Street Journal type Republicans. And so we went back and forth on that. And I like the news to me is just like, it's sort of a pointless argument because all these people are just, again, they're checking out. They're extincting themselves, you know? And like in the end, the only time they ever show any backbone is when they're already 1 foot out the door. And it's reminiscent to me of the 2016 primary where the toughest anti-Trump speech that every candidate gave, except Jeb, was their concession speech. You know, Scott Walker, Rick Perry. You don't remember this now because they've all gone on board, but all of their concession speeches were like, we must stop Trump. He's a danger to the party.
And Cruz, as late as the convention.
Yeah, Cruz. Yeah, as late as the convention, right? It's the same. It's just a Senate version of all that. It's like, finally, now that I'm retiring, I can do the right thing. And it's like, well, if you weren't going to do it while you were in, then what was the point of having you? None.
And incidentally, the one thing that Tillis and Susan Collins do is perhaps hold seats that might otherwise be endangered if they didn't have that moderate patina in those states.
Good point.
So goodbye. I mean, good riddance. You know, they are votes ultimately for the Republican majority in 95% of the case, and that's doing a lot of very, very bad things and not opposing Trump and confirming Trump's nominees in 95% of the cases. So forget it. So maybe
Tillis in Mississippi maybe we'll take. This would be a free. Well, the 5% of times he's opposed.
I guess so. But no. So I am for Mark. Now that I hadn't really thought about it until we were talking, but Tillis mentioned explicitly your friend Mark Robinson. I'm for him being the nominee. Yeah, and I think some Democrats should put in $50 million in some dark money pack to make Mark Robinson the nominee, so we can lose by 15 points, so we can get a Democratic senator from North Carolina who might actually do something about some of these horrible things that Trump and MAGA are doing.
And by the way, and one last thing on this, bipartisanship is dead. You know who the Democrats are trying to recruit in North Carolina? Their leading candidate, Roy Cooper. Yeah. Kind of moderate governor who would come to the Senate and govern and want to govern in an independent and bipartisan fashion. And who are the Republicans going to nominate? Either Trump or the RNC chair who like replaced Ronna Romney because she wasn't sycophantic enough
and wasn't into the election denying stuff enough, right?
Yeah, those will be the two leading candidates. Okay, just really quick on this, two other things on this bill. Murkowski, I think we should save a word for Lisa Murkowski, who I'd love to have on the pod. I would love to have you, Senator Murkowski. She came onto this bill, I guess, because she cut a deal for Alaska where the SNAP requirements. I think the parliamentarian kind of ruled against part of this, but there's going to be some carve out for the cuts to SNAP, which is food stamps for Alaskans. Originally, I think it was for people in the non-contiguous states.
Yeah, that's how they were able to justify it. I don't think you can quite legally, maybe in the Senate, literally say Alaska is exempt from this. Yeah. You have to have a fake kind of, surface rationale that doesn't name the state. So the two non-contiguous states, Hawaii and Alaska, are exempt from the, I don't know what they are, the fraud requirements or something.
Yeah. It's an absurd thing
Ludicrous.
to do. I mean, it's a ludicrous rationale to vote for a bill. I understand, caring about Alaska and all this. But, like, there's a lot of other horrible stuff in the bill, as you mentioned. All of the ICE money. Lisa Murkowski is for that. Just the redistribution of the tax tables in an inverse way. Just the irresponsibility on the debt side. And there's plenty of other reasons to oppose it. The funny part for me, though, is the Hawley. If I bring back Hawley, who thinks he cares about this. It's like, I don't know, why didn't Missouri get this deal?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why is it just Alaska? And shouldn't Josh Hawley have drove a harder bargain? I guess maybe he hopes that the Missourians don't know what contiguous means, so they don't realize that they're getting a raw deal.
And if this is a good thing, I mean, again, if the Democrats had any, they should stand on the floor and point to Murkowski, but they won't do that because they like her and she works with them on some things, not many, but a few. And maybe they're right not to, I don't know, but I feel like it would be nice if they said, you know what, if this is a good deal for Alaska, why isn't it a good deal for the other 48 states? Why are you imposing? I mean, by definition, if you think this is the right thing for you, shouldn't it be the right thing for everyone else? Yeah. And why are you imposing these draconian requirements that are just fancy ways of getting people off Medicaid? They're fake anti-fraud and so forth requirements.
And I had Conan on this week. It's all just more paperwork.
Yeah.
It's just which is very the efficient, the Doge conservative view is just we're going to make the paperwork as onerous as possible.
Right. So if it's good for Alaska not to have this paperwork, why shouldn't it be good for the other states? I don't know.
Yeah, I concur, and I think we'll see a lot for the Democrats today. We'll be monitoring that, because they're gonna have the vote-a-rama and all that. So we'll see. We can give some awards out tomorrow to whoever did the best. One other just item, because I don't think I've mentioned it on this bill. They have a rule that there's going to be you're not allowed if you're a state to do any AI regulation for 5 years. And if you do some, you're not going to get the infrastructure money. I guess it's going to some of the old power sectors. It's just this is such a backwards bill. It's you're not going to get the money for your energy production, which is not going to be green or climate conscious. And if you do any regulation on AI for 5 years, I mean, neither of us are experts on AI, but I've seen enough as far as how quickly the progress has been made, and who knows, maybe it plateaus from now for 5 years, and we'll see. But that's not what the smart AI people say. Most of the smart AI people say there's going to be exponential advancement over the next 5 years. So it's we're going to make a rule now that you can't do any regulation on this at all if you're California, where you're the state that houses all these companies in 2029. That seems insane to me.
Yeah, it's one thing if they wanted to say, but the federal government's going to step up and really resolve this, but I don't see a lot of that happening
the
either.
Opposite. Oh, this is the handout to the Mark Andreessens of the world.
Yeah.
That's what they want. They want total laissez-faire government when it comes to artificial human intelligence.
Yeah, you can't really make it up. I mean, it's we're going out and snatching hardworking immigrants who've been here for decades, who are doing jobs that, and working hard and paying taxes and so forth, raising families because we want deportation, because we believe in the Great Replacement Theory. So that's there. We got hugely intrusive government, the masked ICE agents and all this. AI, which is kind of a serious issue and might do a lot of damage to the country and the world, much more than a few immigrants getting picked up at 7-Elevens to take day jobs. AI, we're not going to touch it. Right?
All right, hey guys, this episode is sponsored by American Giant. American Giant's about keeping things simple and close to home. They aren't affected by the tariffs because their products never left the United States. Buying from American Giant supports American manufacturers. And here's the good news. The clothes are great. They're very normcore. The normcore is in right now. I got myself some shorty shorts. I got a little long one there, and as short as I'd like them, to be honest. But that's just the nature of the products these days. Got a nice basic long sleeve tee you've probably seen me in. The American Giant hoodies are the bomb. My husband had an American Giant hoodie even before they were sponsoring us, and it's his favorite one. So highly recommend across the board. Choosing American Giant means taking a stand for hardworking people, local communities, and quality clothes. Through American ingenuity and innovation, they went against the current to do better. It all started with that greatest hoodie ever made, which I just mentioned. Then came jeans, T-shirts, and more. Support American-made tariff-free clothing with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code BULWARK at American-Giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code BULWARK at American-Giant.com. Go get some clothes. UVA President James Ryan also resigned. I guess the DOJ was looking into their DEI policies at UVA. This seems like simultaneously to me absurd government intrusion and authoritarian creep, and also kind of a weak-kneed submission in the face of that.
Certainly the first. I mean, really kind of amazing, right? If the policies are, there's no evidence the policies were unconstitutional at the time or were any different from 9,000 other institutions' policies. But if they were, they should have, I think they were willing to change them. They did change them. They wanted a scalp. They got the president, who was near to finishing up his term anyway. My sense is that he didn't, but clearly the board told him, was willing to pay that price. I believe if the board had said, we're with you, this is outrageous. We're the proud state of Virginia. Yeah. Virginia, the origin of, the American Revolution, and give us liberty and give us death and all this. We're not letting the federal government, tell us who our president should be. But of course, they are letting the federal government tell them who their president should be. And why? I believe it's partly because 14 of the 17 members, if I'm not mistaken, of the Board of Visitors of UVA are appointed by Glenn Youngkin and the Republican governor of Virginia. And they all have to get along with Donald Trump because, Youngkin, if he gets lucky, maybe he could be Donald Trump Jr.'s vice presidential candidate in 2028. Who knows? Maybe one of those guys on the Board of Visitors can get a cabinet position if one of the original ones gets sick of it. I mean, it's really the degree, but it is seriously. I mean, it shows how deep the authoritarianism and the authoritarian corruption goes, right? Yeah. And we're not Hungary. I mean, America, come on. You can't take over. You can't intimidate the media. You can't take over universities.
You don't hear much from your governor anymore.
Whatever happened to him, I don't know. I know we have a good gubernatorial campaign going, which hopefully Abigail Spanberger will win. I think she will. And Micah Sherrill will win in New Jersey. We'll have two good, moderate, hawkish, and competent Democratic governors in two pretty important states.
Speaking of hawkish, we had a little, kind of tit-a-tat last week over Iran. Some new news on that front. United States obtained intercepted communications between senior Iranian officials discussing the strikes. Apparently, their remark was that the attack was less devastating than they had expected. An atomic weapons inspector, in a separate story, says that potentially they could be back online in months. Some of this stuff is like, how do you even determine it? It's like intel, people with agendas are leaking, right. One way or the other. Like, I don't know that we're getting the full picture. That said, I think one thing we do know is it wasn't the overwhelming victory that Donald Trump had said. And so if he wants to keep maintaining that line, that is going to create tensions both with reality and I think with Israel probably in the coming months. I don't know. What do you make of all that?
No, I agree. And especially with reality. I mean, his original statement, one reason I was a little accommodating to it, or was he said something, and incidentally, if they try to rebuild it, we'll go back in and do this again. Something like that. Remember that was his very original statement. And so, okay, that's the right attitude to take. Plus, we don't know if we got everything. So you got to, as Adam Kinzinger said, I think yesterday, fine, load the planes back up and go in 3 days later and do some more damage and maybe get a better damage assessment. That's not Trump's attitude. He wanted it to be one and done, great victory, peace in our time. Yeah. He's now going towards a deal, it looks like, with Iran that will be a betrayal of his hawkish supporters. And I mean, so I don't know. You could end up with the worst of all worlds, right? He's bombed. He's not going to bomb again. The Iranians have taken the hit. The regime's in power. No regime change. And, they've set back some, I'm sure, but they'll reconstitute the nuclear program and in secret and maybe with more,
and meanwhile, Israel doesn't want the deal.
Right.
They've got Mossad agents clearly inside Iran, and who knows what, what else?
Maybe they can keep just blowing things up and keep on delaying it, which isn't the worst outcome, I suppose. But it just shows again how I'd say I thought there was a moment of minor hope, fleeting hope there for Trump as commander-in-chief, but he's really busy frittering away whatever possible good he did.
Sorry I had to dash that for you.
I know.
We'll keep monitoring. Speaking of the Iranian regime still being in place, there's another story that got in my craw this weekend that I just want to talk about with you for a second. you were just talking about all these deportations at 7-Elevens. This one is even worse. This is happening in the New Orleans suburbs. It's close to me. An Iranian woman who's lived in the United States for 47 years and has no criminal record was detained by federal agents last Sunday. So she's now been in detention for over a week as she was gardening outside of her home. Donna Kashanian, 64, was handcuffed and placed in the back of a pickup truck by agents who arrived in 3 unmarked vehicles. She was transported to Mississippi, where she spent the night. Spent the night in jail, and then back to the South Louisiana ICE processing center. This is very efficient, where she's been for the last week. She came to the United States in '78 on a student visa, applied for asylum, but her claim was denied. Federal officials granted her a reprieve to stay in the country, though, provided she followed the law and appeared at regular immigration appointments. Family members said she has never missed one of those appointments and never been accused of a crime. James Gunn is in New Orleans reporting on that. And this is just so insane. And it comes, I should put one other piece of context around this one and get your reply. Why did this happen? Well, we don't actually have to guess, because the DHS put out a press release that was talking about all of the Iranians that they nabbed after the bombings. So the ICE, I guess, decided, because we were in this skirmish with Iran, that it was the moment to go down their checklist of any people who are Iranian and go find them and smoke them out. Again, it's like the Venezuela thing. Maybe there's a couple bad Iranians on that list. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that Donna Kashanian in Lakeview was not a sleeper cell, Iranian agent planning a counterattack in the country. But that's. So it was she was purely targeted based on ethnicity and race and country of origin.
Yeah, and I think the targeting is the interesting part. I mean, interesting is not the right word, but kind of the grotesque part, right? That they went out. It's not like sometimes they go to some place where there are a lot of people, some of whom were undocumented. They pick up a lot of people. Some of them aren't there, or they aren't documented. I still think it's stupid and bad to treat them the way they've been treated and to kick them out of the country if they're doing no harm. But at least, okay, it happens. Or if they pick up, they're going after an actual criminal, and in the course of it, they pick up people he's hanging out with who are undocumented. This took a lot of work they had to go, someone went through the whole computer, Iranians who are, why do we know that she's Iranian and that she's there? Because she's been reporting every year or month or whatever she's supposed to report, right? She's diligently following the rules she was given. And now you're out, so Pam Bondi can put out a press release. And there was, right? Wasn't there a big thing about, we're getting those Iranians here. We've got 12 of them already deported because it's really grotesque.
Yeah, and we're going to deport her back to where? We literally just bombed Iran.
Yeah.
So we're going to deport her back to the Ayatollahs, where she hasn't been in a half century?
No, we'll send her to South Sudan or to
Rwanda,
some other place. And no, it is grotesque. I mean, the degree of just, as I say, it's one thing to have a harsh and even cruel, I would say, immigration policy, but okay, it's a policy, I guess you'd say, and we can just debate it. This is not even that. This is, for the sake of the press release, we're arresting a woman who's minding her own business and has lived here for almost 50 years.
Darling, so 47 years. She came in school.
So Pam Bondi can strut around. I mean, the DHS, it should all be defunded. It should all be, I'm sorry, Kristi, no. That was bad. Yeah, that was, they're bad. Pam Bondi's bad too. But just different departments.
And they both strut, I think.
Yeah. DHS really, I sort of had come around to defunding ICE about a month or two ago, but now I'm just on the defund DHS thing. Would this country ultimately be safer if there were no DHS? Maybe there should be TSA. I don't know. And are they part of DHS?
I'm pretty anti-TSA.
I know, but they're I'd say they're mostly harmless. I mean, what I mean?
Can we do just a quick aside? It's been 24 years since 9/11, and people are still taking off their shoes. It's a ridiculous system.
You should invest in the pre-check. You don't have to take off your shoes.
I don't. I'm not taking off my shoes, but there are still people taking off their shoes, and they've changed. How much money did we spend? This was my Doge thing. They've changed to the new, whatever you call them, scanners for the bags. And the system is worse. The system is worse now. Now they do the thing where they centralized it so your bag goes in and then someone's watching it. But sometimes your bag just sits in there now.
Right.
And I'm getting fucking annoyed. And I'm like, how is the system less efficient than it was in 2003, 2 years after 9/11? So no, I could get rid of all of it. TSA. Tom Nichols said he was against DHS from the start. So he said that's a principled stand for him because something about efficiencies and like any of the elements of DHS that they do could also be done.
Well, they all
inside
existed, obviously, or many
Yeah.
of them existed before DHS existed in different departments, Treasury and Justice and other places. And I think remember at the time, this was a classic case where we began by talking about bipartisanship and all. This was a wonderful bipartisan centrist thing. I think it was Lieberman and Collins, and I love Joe Lieberman and I respect Susan Collins. This was going to make it all better. And sometimes all that bipartisan stuff doesn't work too well either. You know what I mean? It might have been better just to leave these agencies where they were. But anyway, DHS has become but the money that's going to DHS, it's going to become, it is, I mean, it sounds hysterical to even say it this way, but it is going to become virtually Trump's internal police force. And you put that together with the troops that he's mobilized, which we've all decided, I guess, is fine. They're still out in L.A. There hasn't been a riot in L.A. in 2 weeks, has there been?
Since before the Iran
They're
war.
out, but the Marines, the National Guard, and the Marines are out there, and they've laid the predicate very explicitly in Trump's memo and elsewhere to use the troops wherever else they want. And it's only the Supreme Court. Like, just get on that. What are they doing? Anything? I mean, the courts do. The district courts have tried to do a few things. Supreme Court basically slapped them down last week. And so for all I know, maybe there's some case chugging its way leisurely through the court. Chief Justice Roberts is telling us all not to get too upset. You shouldn't really criticize the judges. It's just a sore loser if you criticize the judges. Didn't Roberts say something like that on Saturday? I mean, another establishment Republican who's useless, if I could say. Anyway, the courts aren't going to save us, but it's bad. It's bad, the DHS. And
there's going to be more people in ICE detention than in the federal prison system if this thing goes, if they get all of their plans. Like, that's how big their plans are. I'm glad you mentioned the military in the streets. I'm now tweeting just basically once a day. It's like, are there still military in Los Angeles? Like, why?
Right.
Why? They don't even offer a stated rationale, and everybody just kind of has moved on. It's not on the news.
My friend Tom Joscelyn, with whom I did a very good, if I could say, podcast yesterday, people might watch it, the Bulwark on Sunday. Very, very good forest, not trees, kind of look at the progress of Trump's authoritarian agenda over the 8 months since he was elected. And it's pretty scary when you step back and look at everything that's happening. On the troops thing, yeah, that's an important part of it, normalizing that, getting people used to it. So when there is a riot somewhere or some real disturbance somewhere, suddenly there's not 4,000, there's 24,000, and it's not just National Guard, it's Marines and so forth. So,
just one more thing on the Iranian woman, because I was just thinking about this. It is the idea that I can understand why people on the nationalist side are like, well, it's like whatever, she didn't follow the rules. But it's like this is just how things have worked throughout the whole country. I was thinking about this. I was looking at the woman. It made me think about my mother's grandmother, so my great-grandmother on the maternal side, Taiti. She came from Lebanon. Her husband was probably an arranged marriage situation or something at least in that ballpark, was older. My great-grandfather came over, got a job, worked, brought Taiti over. They had 7 kids, grew up here. 3 of them, at least 3, served in World War II. I was reading a book from the diaries of one of my great uncles, who I wrote diaries about his time. He was in Hawaii when Pearl Harbor was bombed. So I was reading the diaries of that day and the following days that he was writing at the time, the letters he was writing home to my great-grandmother. But it's like, she didn't really learn English that well. Her English was poor. Did they really follow the immigration laws? I mean, I don't, and it was the early 1900s. The rules were very different back then, right? And similarly to this woman, it's like, would you say that she's illegal? Because when you bring this up, sometimes people are like, well, they broke the law to come into this country, but she really didn't. She came as a student. Now I'm talking about this Donna Kashanian woman in New Orleans. She came as a student and then applied for asylum, didn't get it, but then they said she could stay, right? So it's not like she came across the Rio Grande, right? So similar situation. And I'm thinking to myself, imagine my great-grandmother being 65, in the St. Louis suburbs, gardening outside the home, and thinking about my mother and my uncles and aunts and them being kids, and having her be snatched and handcuffed and put into the back of a truck. And then had a bunch of people being like, well, she never learned the language, wasn't really part of an American, it wasn't really an American. And it's like, no, that is how the whole country has happened. Like people like this coming to the country, having, my great grandmother had kids, served in the military. She had grandkids who are doctors and like members of their, upstanding members of the community. Now here I am blabbing my fucking mouth on a podcast. Like that's like how shit works in this country. And the idea that we're going to start like taking these people, like she is not any less of an American than Stephen Miller in any meaningful way, right? Like the whole thing is just like it feels very against the American tradition. And I just think it's important that like everybody talks about it, because you start to see like this conventional wisdom that came in that like this isn't good for him. It's not good to talk about immigration. That's a good winner for Trump. I just reject it, because everybody has a story like this,
I mean, nativism is sadly part of the American tradition too, both in the 1920s, obviously, and in the 1850s. Lincoln was really appalled by it when he saw it with the Germans. His great speech in Cincinnati about the prejudice against those immigrants, and he famously has that statement about whether some people are the grandchildren, he says, great grandchildren of people who fought in the American Revolution. Some people's parents just came over. We're all equally Americans. You know? And no one seems to quite have the nerve. Well, not no one, but people should say that more often today. I couldn't agree more. And the nativism is ugly. I used to think, well, it's kind of an unfortunate and weird episodes in American history. But I could see people were a little freaked out. Too many people speaking Italian, and too many Irish guys in bars, and too many Germans reading German language newspapers and all this kind of thing. But actually, it's always been uglier than that. And you see the ugliness now.
I guess that's why I brought up Tahiti, because of her lack of English speaking, which it's not to neg her. That's like a common complaint, right, of the nativist crowd, right? Oh, they're reading the German newspapers, they're not assimilating. Like this is just like, this has happened for 300 years now, where this happens, where like they do assimilate. Donna has children that that were doing these interviews that live in New Orleans, that like contribute to the community, right? Like that's just how things work.
When I was a little kid, my grandmother, after my grandfather died, moved in with us in our apartment. I guess maybe I was junior high and high school at that point, high school probably. And on my way home, I would stop at the newsstand to buy her the Yiddish newspaper, which came out in the afternoon. So like you couldn't even get it delivered. It was already dwindling away in Yiddish. I kind of used to enjoy reading a few words that I could. It's written in Hebrew, which I kind of knew enough to read. But the words are Yiddish, which is really more like German. So it's just kind of a weird thing. Anyway, it's kind of interesting to me as a ninth grader to try to read 3 sentences. But so I used to buy it, come home with this. And so she had been here for 40, 50 years. Her son-in-law, my father, had fought in World War II. Her daughter was a professor of history. And I was buying her the Yiddish language paper. Was that so terrible?
Well, thank God Kristi Noem wasn't around back then. You would have been shackled and then thrown into the back of a truck. English only. All right, last thing. I'm going to give people some dessert. Is this dessert or not? I don't know. You can decide for yourself. I suffered through Ross Douthat's interview with Peter Thiel because I'm a sick person. And there's one clip that's been going around. And in case you guys haven't had this, just the experience of being able to listen to this moment, I want to share it with all of you.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
in this. Should the human race survive?
Yeah.
Some really hard-hitting journalism from Ross Douthat there. Ross gets some slings and arrows around these parts, but he's asking the tough questions. Do you want the human race to endure? Peter Thiel. It seems like basically the answer is no, but he doesn't want to say it. So he comes around to yes after 30 seconds. This is the man that made it, that set the vice president in place. And it's a little concerning. You and Peter used to hang out. It's a little concerning, the level of influence that these people have.
Totally. I mean, he's a very smart guy who I 20 years ago thought was an interesting person, eccentric, and his views were clearly a little off the deep end. But, interesting guy to have to discuss texts of political philosophy with, because he was perceptive and willing to be contrarian, to say the least. People like that. It should be a good lesson that, what's interesting, sort of interesting intellectually, maybe not kind of as interesting as I thought, honestly, but can be very unhealthy politically. And I guess I didn't have anything to do with his success. Obviously, he had made zillions of dollars by the time I met him, but And I guess I should have seen. I guess he had some political ambitions at the time, but he was writing checks to the Ron Paul campaign in 2008. It was just kind of quirky, and silly. But here we are, right? I mean, it is the true. I think it's the only thing I would say is the true extremism. This is a point Joscelyn made very well. The movement is really extreme. Trump is a ridiculous con man who doesn't understand a word that Peter Thiel has ever said about any of this and doesn't care and is in it for himself and the grift and some old-fashioned bigotry and so forth. But we should not underestimate the true extremism of the authoritarian movement. And Trump is on board with it. Trump is right in his own way, what's the expression, riding that tiger. Yeah. And this is Tom's point. He can't get off. The idea that he can just say at some point, this just gone a little far. I mean, he's tried to say it once or twice, right?
Yeah.
Why are we deporting the guys my hotel friends say are useful, to keep the hotels going? And then Miller says this and the movement says this. And suddenly Trump, I guess we have to do that. The degree of authoritarianism we can get with a buffoon like Trump as leader of that authoritarian movement or the nominal leader, I guess I've slightly underestimated that. I've always thought that would be a bit of a check on the extremism. Maybe it's a bit of a check, but it sure isn't much of one.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I'll just say for the listeners, if that little morsel wasn't enough and you want the full meal, there's also like a 5-minute discussion of who the Antichrist is on that podcast. And Peter Thiel suggests it might be Greta Thunberg or a Greta Thunberg-like figure could be the Antichrist. So anyway,
Peter and Ross agree there is such a person around. It's just a question of identifying the right person.
I think they both agree that the Antichrist is out there. Yeah. I was like, Peter suggests it might be Greta Thunberg, and then he goes down a weird tangent. And I was like, man, that was strange. And then like 4 minutes later, Ross is like, I want to circle back to the Antichrist question. It's quite the podcast. I'd encourage you guys to listen. Lastly, my only other thing is, and it relates to the AI stuff, I agree with all of you on the near-term acute authoritarian danger. I'm just now increasingly starting to monitor the medium-term, like tech oligarch fascist authoritarian danger. They are so the degree to which they do not care about humans. Like that is a funny quote, but it is an anti-human movement. A lot of these guys really do think that we're going to go into the singularity, or that we're going to our head is going to we're going to be mutant figures. Like they really do think that is coming, and it's an alarming ideology. And tying it back to the thing I mentioned earlier, like the fact that they have inserted themselves so deeply into this, there's no actual necessary overlap between the nativists and but the nativists and the more traditional MAGA culture war element is a much more potent force, and that they have kind of inserted themselves into it with this anti-human ideology, and that they are going to now, make sure that Dr. Strangelove out in Silicon Valley can do whatever he wants without any oversight. I'll leave people with that alarming thought. So I don't know if you have any final
I think
words.
it's a very important point. It's funny. A guy named Mike Brock has this.
Mike Brock has. That's good.
So I've spoken to him once or twice. I don't really know him. And his most recent one is very interesting. He says exactly as your point. And then he says, what they don't understand, the plutocrats and the AI types, is they're going to get eaten up ultimately by the pitchfork wielding populace. Yeah. And that's how it works often. Yeah. It is sometimes how it works, but I guess I'm slightly on the other side of that, which is, I don't know, these guys are powerful, the AI plutocrats. And can't they just continue to manipulate and exploit the foolish, bigoted nativists? I mean, either way is a bad outcome, whichever one is exploiting the other, or they just stay in a kind of tension, slight tension, but they agree that
equilibrium.
They agree about what they hate, what they have in common in terms of their hatreds. But I agree. I'm a little freaked out by the AI plutocrat side of it, and it's a very good point you make. It is kind of anti-human.
All right, everybody. Me and Bill Kristol in person. When we get in person, it gets really dark. Everybody else, we'll see you back here. I got a fun podcast tomorrow. Might have to be a double header because we're going to do a little bit of, something offbeat. But then I guess we're also going to talk about the news. So we'll do a little bit of both. We'll see you all back here then.